Welcome back to This Day. I'm BJ Arnett. We've been having this fantastic discussion about the history of the Black church from our perspective of all three of us growing up as PKs and understanding that if we walked down the street when we were children and did something wrong, before we got home, we get a spanking, and when we got home too, it was going to be a spanking. That was just the way it was. But now we take a look at the history of the church and how and I do say, the church marked me as a child. I know I was marked. I was bracketed and didn't even know that I was being trained not to do certain things. So when I went to college and did them, it was wretched inside of me, like it was like something was cutting me up because I knew I was doing the wrong thing, yet that experimental moment of college, you know, where you think, don't nobody know that you're cutting up crazy. Now we look at the church, and there's so many young people missing. They're not attracted to the church. What have we missed from the 60s, the 70s, even the 80s to today, 2024? What are we missing in the church that allowed that to happen? Are we missing the community?
I think it's the community, and also we've gotten so, I'm just going to say Americanized in, climbing the social ladder, getting the top jobs, getting the income. And I feel a lot of times that has just really been a barrier with us staying in the church.
To keeping us grounded in faith.
Yes.
We're so worried about looking right, having the right job, having the right house, car, and all those things.
Yes.
But that isn't the core that makes us who we are.
No, it's not.
I want to go back again to those things that, because we go through Martin Luther King Day, we go through a month, 28 days of Black history, but the effect of who we are and where we're going really was established in the church, and then we had a way of doing things. So I'm going to talk about now what I experienced in watching what you guys did at the Atlanta History Center, which was just wonderful.
Thank you.
You took us to a place called the Black Church and Fashion. And, and I'm going to say it, you had on the church lady hat and the church lady suit. I was like, who is that woman? Is that Professor Sumpter? And you as well. I was like, I don't recognize these women, but I recognize these women from where my grandpa's Primitive Baptist Church was, and it really made me feel good. It made me feel good, and I watched the young people in the audience who were like oohing and awing at the fashion that we grew up seeing.
Yes.
So there was at that moment as they were watching, there was this, oh, this is great. How in the world do we keep them understanding that it really is great? Talk to us about that experience at the Atlanta History Center.
That was just phenomenal. I learned so much. I just thought I had all the experience in the world, but as I began to do a little bit more study, a little bit more research, things that I just did naturally, just from being in the church, and why, as I was studying, I said, oh, this is why. You don't think about it because you're just so a part of the church.
It amazed me that you all were even able to tell us why the mothers of the church wore white and why the ushers had one hand behind the back. I never thought about it, but bring forth some of those dynamics for us. Why women wore the hats. I absolutely didn't know that, and I'm not going to say it. I'm going to let you say it.
The women wore that. Now, I don't know if you remember, but I remember some of the churches we went to growing up, the women always had a head covering.
Yes.
And the hat was essentially the head covering. It was to honor the Most High, to honor God, to say, my head is covered, I'm submitted. And one of the things that we brought with that was we were so bullied because of our hair,
Yes.
the crown that we were born with.
Yes.
And that hat was an extension of the hair that through slavery we were told was not adequate, that we needed to cover.
To hide.
So we use those hats. We use our head coverings to honor God. We use our head coverings to show the Most High that we loved Him and that we were honoring Him by being submitted to Him. But we also made them elaborate and ornate because we're creative people.
Creative people,
Yes.
and we needed to show something that made us feel fantastic. Because one of the things that you guys brought out was the shaving of the head and the cutting of the hair. And at the turn of the century, from slavery into sharecropper into truly being understood and walking as a free person, knowing that you really weren't free, I had no idea that the shaving of the head was a thing that was constantly done in order to keep this slave, or what was said to be free at that point,
Keep you subjected.
to keep you subjected. I had no idea. But then to see how historically the hats emerged and how they became very ornate, it made total sense.
Yes.
So tell us about, from a design perspective, what were those hats saying as they began to add all of this opulence to them?
Those hats were basically saying, we are the chosen people. We are God's children. We are His people, and therefore we need to be beautiful. We need to be regal. It was a crown. It was a crown of being, you know, a princess, a princess. It was just to honor Him. And then you want to honor Him with your very best, the most beautiful thing that you could do, even for the men, to be, just present yourselves as His best, handsome, just refined.
Refined. And I remember thinking the picture of the black family going to church was the most perfect thing in the world.
Yes.
I remember pot-au-soir pumps, clutch bag,
Yes.
gloves,
Yes.
hat, hosiery with the seam up the back, not pantyhose. I remember that, and I remember you had to have, when you bought a certain dress, you had to have a certain kind of slip.
Yes.
You had to have, you know, all of those. A slip today, if I said that to my students right now, they would be like, what is a slip? What are you talking about? But you had to have a certain everything to make the look just right. And you better not go outside their front door, even on the porch, in your Sunday clothes, because that was
A
not
special dress.
that was a special
Yes,
dress.
it was special.
But you mentioned the men, and I remember the deacons in our church always had a white handkerchief just straight, not puffed out or anything, just straight and squared off. They always stood very taut.
Yes.
And they always had one hand behind the back and the white gloves. What was the white glove and hand behind the back about?
That was so interesting to find out that during slavery, if the enslaved served the master, they had to have the gloves on, because in those times, the master did not want the slave touching, you know, him. And they felt that if the slave touched him, some stories go that it was a sin to touch the master because we were unclean.
Wow.
So that was one reason for the white glove. The hand behind the back was also, stories told, that was so that we wouldn't steal. If your hand
So
is
one hand behind the-
out and one hand behind your back,
Wow.
that keeps you straight and narrow, and you cannot steal. What we did in the church, we reversed that. That white glove was purity. That hand behind the back was protocol. It was all about the men really expressing themselves as orderly, things in order, leadership, etc. So we turned the tide on that.
So we had to turn how we thought of those things.
Yes.
That is just so amazing to me, that where that came from and how we were able to turn it. But then one of the other things that you mentioned and I remember this so well, the mothers of the church wore white, and what was their job, or why were there mothers of the church?
Community again, family. We called each other brothers, sisters. All of that just tied into who we were. The mothers were there for support. The mothers were there to hug you, to chastise you. Just to be that leadership for the women in the church.
And I remember very definitely that the mothers of the church, and you said it, to hug you, but to also chastise you. And if you got a certain look from a mother of the church in the front of the church, and you were in the back of the church, because we always tried to sit on the back row. I don't know about y'all, but we were teenagers, and we said
Exactly.
if we sat on the back row, they wouldn't see us. We were always wrong. But the mother of the church would give you this eye, and you knew after church or during church, there would be this finger in your back. That would be like, you better not even think about it. And I smile about it now, but then I was just terrified. But they always had a peppermint for you. They always had some change to put in your little purse. Do you remember that?
Yes.
They always had some change to put in your little purse. And they always had a word for you.
Yes.
Like they constantly spoke over us
Yes.
as children. And especially as mothers to young women, they spoke over us. They spoke word of us. They told us who we are to be.
Yes.
And that in itself gave us a place that made us feel whole and perfect
Yes.
and fine.
Purpose, yes.
So there's a lineage, but there's a place where we have to come back to that community. What would you say, what either of you or both of you, that is the thing that you would want those who are coming after us to know and to understand in these last 2 minutes of time that we have?
We just need to be restored by faith. If we can be restored by faith, we can figure out how we can get where we need to so that we can continue to honor the Most High. Because things have changed now. Things are different, and we can't do the business as usual.
No.
We have to move forward, but we have to move forward in faith.
Moving forward in faith. I think right there, that's a word in itself, moving forward in faith. We've got to go right to that word and say, what is the word saying to us, about us, and to us?
Exactly.
Live it out in strength and go forward in faith. Today is not the time for the faint at heart. We've got to soldier up. Soldier up and be ready to stand on faith. You guys, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
And bringing back memories of the mother of the church, the deacons, the pastors. And, you know, I remember the pastor's robes always had to have the big sleeve, and the sleeve was even bigger if it was a special occasion. I remember all of that. And I now know the reason why for much of it. So thank you guys so much for going to the Atlanta History Center and giving us an understanding of our history. So as we go forth in faith, we recognize that the history that we know of is the history that we need to grab a hold of, those nuggets of truth and bring them back to the church today. There's a young woman and a young man who just needs to hear, "Thus saith the Lord," about you.
Yes.
That could change their total life. If someone would take the time to be rather historic and to say, you are made in His image and His likeness.
Exactly.
And you are loved by God. Walk in faith. God bless you.